So, hello and welcome back yet again to Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where in the last chapter, along with completely breaking me, we did read about, it looks like Ned Land and the rest of the Shanghai pirates are going to go and visit some dry land. I love the fact that Ned Land is going to get to see some dry land. We love that for him. So, yeah, that is where we were. I'm starting to think that Monsieur Arnaud has a great appreciation of masculine beauty because I've noticed, especially when listening to Aaron reading, that he comments a lot about guys and their physiques. Not that I'm complaining. That was one of those little half observations that I noticed as the listener instead of the reader, which I kind of enjoy. I'm really enjoying the trading off guest reading. I hope you guys are too. Aaron is a really good reader, even if occasionally he does break me. What you couldn't see off camera, because I was in here listening to him while he was reading, is I was to the point where I had my face stuffed into a pillow trying to muffle the laughter last night. It didn't entirely succeed, and I love living with all of my kids again. It's funny because Aaron, my youngest, is how an extrovert managed to come from me, I don't know, but I celebrate that fact. So, anyway, enough of that. It is time for more of Mr. Verne, Monsieur Verne, who has a very vivid imagination. I did kind of do a little half skim, and not this chapter, but the next one might have some ishy, problematic descriptions of the native inhabitants, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because we're going to try and do two chapters again tonight, beginning with chapter 17 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Chapter 17 is titled Some Days on Land. Touching land again made a great impression on me. Ned Land struck the ground with his foot as if to take possession of it. Yet we had only been, according to Captain Nemo's expression, the passengers of the Nautilus for 2 months. That is to say, in reality, we had only been the captain's prisoners for the last 2 months. In a very short time, we were within gunshot of the coast. All of the horizon was hidden by a curtain of admirable forests. Ned saw a coconut tree, brought down some nuts, broke them, and we drank their milk and ate their kernel with relish that protested against the ordinary fare of the Nautilus. "Excellent," said Ned Land. "Exquisite," said Conseil. "Let us go on with our excursion," I said, "and keep a sharp lookout. Although the island appears to be uninhabited, it might contain individuals who would be easier to please than we on the nature of the game." We penetrated the somber vaults of the forest and for 2 hours walked about in every direction. We found that the bread tree was abundant on this island. Ned Land knew the fruit well. He had eaten it before on numerous voyages, and he knew how to prepare its edible substance. The very sight of it excited his appetite, and he could hold himself back no longer. "Sir," he said to me, "I may die if I don't taste a little of that breadfruit." "Taste, friend Ned. Taste as much as you like. We're here to make experiments, so let's do it." "Won't take long," said the Canadian. And with a burning glass, he lighted a fire of dead wood, which crackled joyously. Conseil took a dozen of the fruit to Ned Land, who placed them in a fire of cinders after having cut them into slices, the whole time saying, "You'll see, sir, how good this bread is." especially when one has been deprived of it for so long.
It's better than bread, said Ned. It's like a delicate pastry. Have you ever eaten it, sir?
No, I haven't, I told him.
Well, then, prepare for something very good. If you don't return, I am no longer the king of harpooners.
In a short time, the side that was exposed to the fire was quite black. In the interior appeared a white paste and a sort of tender crumb with a taste a bit like that of an artichoke. It must be acknowledged, this bread was excellent. I ate it with great pleasure. Later on, we gathered bananas, mangoes, and pineapples, but still Ned was not satisfied.
All these vegetables don't constitute a meal. They're only good for dessert. There is the soup and the roast.
Yeah, I told him. You did promise us cutlets, which does seem to me very problematic.
Sir, said Ned, our sport is not only not ended, it hasn't even begun. Be patient. We will end by meeting with some animal or bird, and if it's not here, it'll be in another spot.
And if it is not today, it will be tomorrow, said Conseil, for we must not go too far away. I vote we go back to the boat now.
Already?
Cried Ned. We do have to be back before night.
What time is it?
Said the Canadian. It is at least 2 o'clock, said Conseil.
Ah, how the time does go on dry land.
Ned sighed regretfully. At last, in 5 of the evening, loaded with our riches, we left the shores of the island and half an hour later reached the Nautilus. No one appeared upon our arrival. The enormous iron cylinders seemed quite deserted. When the provisions were embarked, I went down to my room, and there I found my supper ready. I ate, and then went to sleep. The next day, the 6th of January, there was nothing new on board. No noise in the interior, not a sign of life. The canoe had remained next to the boat, in the very place where we had left it. We decided to return to the island of Gibola. Ned Land hoped to be more lucky today from a hunting point of view, and he wanted to go to a different part of the forest. We left at sunrise. The boat, carried by the waves which were flowing inland, reached the island in a few moments. We landed, and thinking it was better to trust to the instinct of Ned Land, we followed him, his long legs threatening to outdistance us. He went up the coast westward, and fording some beds of streams, he reached the high plain that was bordered by the admirable forests. Some kingfishers were on the banks of the stream, but they would not let themselves be approached. Their circumspection proved to me that these fowl knew what to think of bipeds of our sort, and I therefore concluded that, if the island was not inhabited, it was at least frequented by humans. After having crossed some rich meadowland, we reached the borders of a little wood animated by the song and flight of many birds. There are only birds still, said Conseil.
Some of them are good to eat, said Ned.
No, Ned, said Conseil. I see nothing but simple parrots.
Conseil, said Ned, a parrot is the friend of those who have nothing else to eat.
And I may add, I said, that this bird, quite well prepared, is delicious. At about 11, we had traversed the first range of mountains that form the center of the island and had killed nothing. Hunger drove us. The hunters had relied on the products of the chase, and obviously they had planned poorly. Fortunately, Conseil, to his great surprise, made a double shot and secured us breakfast. He brought down a white and a wood pigeon, which, quickly plucked and suspended onto a skewer, were roasted in front of a fire of dead wood. While those interesting animals were cooking, Ned prepared some of the breadfruit, and then the pigeons were devoured to the bones and pronounced quite excellent. Nutmegs, with which they are in the habit of stuffing their croup, flavors the flesh of them and makes them delectable. And now, Ned, what is there to want?
Some four-footed game, Mr. Arno, said Ned Land. All these pigeons are just side dishes and mouthfuls, and until I've killed an animal with cutlets, I won't be content.
Happily, around 2 o'clock, Ned killed a magnificent hog. The animal came in time to give us real quadruped meat, and it was quite well received. Ned was proud of his shot. The hog, struck by the electric bullet, had fallen over stone dead. Ned soon skinned and prepared it, after having cut out a half a dozen cutlets to furnish us with grilled meat for our evening meal. Then we went on with the chase, and it was again to be marked by Ned and Conseil's exploits. The two friends, beating the bushes, roused a herd of kangaroos that fled away, bounding on their elastic paws. But these animals did not take flight too quickly for the electric gun to stop them in their course.
Ah, Professor, cried Ned, excited by the hunt. What excellent game, especially stewed. What provisions for the Nautilus? 2, 3, 5 of them down. And when I think that we shall eat all that meat, and that those imbeciles on board won't get a mouthful, ha!
These animals were small. They belonged to a species of kangaroo rabbits that live habitually in the hollow of trees and that are of extraordinary speed. Although they are of middling size, they do at least furnish an excellent meat. We were extremely satisfied with the result of our hunt. The delighted Ned proposed to return the next day to this enchanted island, which he wanted to clear of all of its edible quadrupeds, but he reckoned without circumstances. At 6 p.m., we returned to the shore. Our boat was stranded in its place. The Nautilus, looking like a long rock, emerged from the waves 2 miles away from the island. Ned, with no more delay, began preparing dinner. "Suppose we do not return to the Nautilus tonight," said Conseil.
Suppose we never do, said Ned.
But just then a stone fell at our feet and cut short Ned's proposition. And that is the end of chapter 17. I'm going to do that thing where I go and get a drink, and I will be right back. Well, that was quite the chapter, wasn't it? At least Ned finally got some land grub instead of just ocean grub, so maybe he'll be in a better mood, although it seems like they're getting attacked. So, like I said, this one does seem to possibly have some probably not the best depictions of the native people of this island, but we shall see. We just have to keep in mind the time of the history that it was written. But with that, it is time to jump back in to chapter 18 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is titled Captain Nemo's Thunderbolt. We looked toward the forest without raising, my hand stopping in its movement towards my mouth, and Ned's completing its journey. "A stone does not normally fall from the sky," said Conseil. Another stone, carefully rounded, which struck out of Conseil's hand a pigeon leg, gave even more weight to the man's observation. "The boat," I said, making for the sea. In fact, we were obliged to beat a retreat, for about 20 natives armed with bows and slings appeared on the skirts of the thicket that hid the horizon 100 steps away. Our boat was anchored about 60 feet from us. The natives approached us, not running, making very hostile demonstrations, and it rained stones and arrows towards us. Ned did not wish to leave his provisions, not caring about the imminence of the danger. He went on tolerably quickly with his pig on one side and his kangaroos on the other, though. In 2 minutes, we were on the shore. It was but an instant to land the boat with the provisions and arms and push it into the sea and to take the 2 oars. We had not gone 2 cables' length away when 100 of the natives, howling and gesticulating, entered the water all the way to their waists. I watched to see if their appearance would not attract some men from the Nautilus onto the platform, but no. The enormous machine lying off seemed completely deserted. 20 minutes later, we ascended the sides. The panels were open. After we made it to the boat, we re-entered the interior of the Nautilus. I went down to the saloon, from whence I heard a few chords. Captain Nemo was there, bending over his organ, plunged in musical ecstasy. "Captain," I said. He seemed not to hear. "Captain," I said again, touching his hands. He shuddered and turned. "Ha! Is it you, Professor?" he said. "Well, have you had good sport?" "Yes, Captain," I told him, "but we have unfortunately brought back a troop of bipeds whose neighborhood appears to me to be dangerous." "What bipeds?" "Savages." "Savages?" said Captain Nemo. "And you are astonished, Professor, that having set foot on one of the lands of this globe, that you find savages? Where are there none? Besides, those that you call savages, are they really worse than the rest?" "But, Captain—" "For my part, sir, I have met with some everywhere." "Well," I told him, "if you do not wish to receive any on board the Nautilus, you would do well to take a few precautions." "Make yourself easy, Professor. There's nothing worth troubling about." "But, Captain, there are many of them." "How many?" 100 at least." "Monsieur Arnaud," said the captain, who had again placed his fingers on the organ keys, "if all the natives of Papua were gathered together on that shore, the Nautilus would still have nothing to fear." I went up again to the platform. Night had fallen, for in this low latitude the sun sets quickly and there is no twilight. I could only see the island vaguely, but the numerous fires lit on the beach showed that the natives did not dream of leaving. I remained like this, alone for several hours, sometimes thinking about the natives, but otherwise not anxious about them, for the confidence of the captain had gained upon me. Sometimes I forgot about them completely to admire the splendors of the tropical night. Around midnight, seeing that all was tranquil on the dark waves as well as under the trees on the shore, I went down to my cabin and peacefully slept. Night went by without any misadventure. The natives were doubtless frightened by the sight of the monster that was stranded in their bay, for the open panels would have given them easy access to the interior. At 6 a.m. on the 8th of January, I went up to the platform. The morning was breathtaking. The island soon appeared through the rising mists, its shores first, then the summits. The natives were still there, more numerous than yesterday, perhaps 500 or 600 strong. Some of them, taking advantage of low tide, had come onto the coral heads at less than 2 cable length from the Nautilus. During the whole time of low water, the natives roamed around near the Nautilus, but they were not noisy. I heard them frequently repeat the word "Asai," and from their gestures I understood that they invited me to land. an invitation I thought it best to decline. The natives returned to the island at about 11 a.m. as soon as the heads of the coral began disappearing under the rising tide, but I saw their number had considerably increased on the shore. It was possible they had come from all the neighboring islands. Within a few hours, they had assembled about 20 pirogues, and then they surrounded the Nautilus. These pirogues, hollowed out of the trunks of trees, long, narrow, and well calculated for speed, were kept in equilibrium by means of double braces of bamboo which floated on the surface of the water. They were worked by skillful paddlers, half naked, and their approach made me uneasy. It was evident that these Papuans had already had some relations with Europeans and knew their ships, but what must they have thought of this long iron cylinder without either masts or funnel? Nothing good, I'm sure, but they did keep a respectful distance. However, seeing it did not move, they soon grew more confident by degree and tried to familiarize themselves with it. Now, it was precisely this familiarity which it was necessary to stop them from doing. Our arms, which made no noise, could only produce an indifferent effect upon these natives, who only seemed to respect noisy weapons. A thunderbolt without the roll of thunder would not much frighten anyone, although the danger exists in the lightning, not the noise. At that moment, the pirogues approached nearer to the Nautilus and began shooting arrows at it. "Why, it hails," said Conseil, "and they might be poisoned." "I'll go tell the captain," I said. I went down to the saloon and found no one there. I ventured to knock at the door of the captain's room. A "Come in," answered me. I entered and found Captain Nemo occupied with a calculation where X and a few other algebraical signs were plentiful. "I'm disturbing you?" "Yes, Monsieur Arnaud," said the captain, "but I think you must have a serious reason for seeing me." "Quite serious. We are surrounded by the pirogues of the natives, and in just a few moments we will certainly be assailed by hundreds of them." "Ah," said the captain, "so they're here with their pirogues?" "Yes." "Well, all we have to do is shut the panels." "Yes, sir. I came to tell you that." "Nothing easier," said the captain. Pressing an electric bell, he transmitted an order to the crew. "Well, that's done, sir," he said. "The boat is in its place, and the panels are shut. You do not fear, I imagine, that these gentlemen can break in the walls which the balls of your frigate couldn't touch?" "No, Captain. But there does exist another danger." "What is that?" "It is that tomorrow, at the same time, you're going to have to open the panels to renew the air of the Nautilus." "Certainly, as our vessel breathes like the cetaceans." "Well, what if at that moment the Papuans occupied the platform? I don't think you could stop them from entering." "You believe they will get upon the vessel?" "Oh, I'm sure of it." "Well, let them. I see no reason to prevent it. The Papuans are poor, and I will not let my visit to the Gilboa coast cost the life of a single one of them." I was left alone. I went to bed, but slept poorly. I heard the natives stomping about on the platform, making a deafening noise. The night passed thus, without the crew seeming to come out of their habitual inertia. They were no more anxious about the presence of these cannibals than the soldiers of an ironclad fortress would be about ants crawling over the iron. But me? I rose at 6 a.m. The panels had not been opened, and the air therefore had not been renewed in the interior, but the reservoirs, filled and ready for any event, sent a few cubic yards of oxygen into the impoverished atmosphere. I worked in my room until noon without seeing Captain Nemo even for a moment. There seemed to be no preparation for departures being made at all. I waited for a bit longer, and then I went into the saloon. The clock was at 2:30. In 10 minutes, the tide would be at maximum, and if Captain Nemo had not been making boasting promises, the Nautilus would immediately be free. And if not, many months would pass before we would leave this coral bed. But in the meantime, a few shocks were felt in the hull of the vessel, and I heard the sides grating against coral. At 2:35, Captain Nemo appeared. "We're going to start." "Ah?" I said. "I have given orders to have the panels opened." "What about the Papuans?" "The Papuans?" said Captain Nemo. "Won't they get into the interior?" "How?" "Through the panels that you open?" "Monsieur Arnaud," said Captain Nemo, "it is not so easy to enter the Nautilus through its panels, even when opened." I looked dumbfounded at the cabin. "You don't understand," he told me. "Not at all." "Well, come, and you will see." I got up and went towards the central staircase. There, Ned Land and Conseil, much puzzled, were looking at some of the crew who were opening the panels, while cries of rage and vocal noise resounded outside. The lids were opened on the outside, and 70 horrid faces appeared. But the first of the natives who put his hand on the balustrade, thrown backwards by something invisible, fled howling and making extraordinary yells. 10 more of his companions succeeded him and had the same fate. Conseil was ecstatic. Ned, carried away by violent instincts, sprang up the staircase, but as soon as he touched the handrail with both hands, he was thrown back in turn. "Malediction!" he cried. "I'm thunderstruck." That word explained it all to me. It was no longer a handrail, but a metal cable charged with electricity. Whoever touched it felt a formidable shock, and that shock would have been mortal if Captain Nemo had thrown all the current of his apparatus into this. It may truly be said that between his assailants and he had hung an electric banner that no one could cross. In the meantime, the frightened natives had beaten a retreat. We, half laughing, consoled the unfortunate Ned Land, who was cursing like one possessed. But at that moment, the Nautilus, raised by the last of the tidal waves, left the coral bed. Its screw beat the waters with a majestic slowness, and its speed increased by degrees and navigated the surface of the ocean. It left safe and sound from the dangerous passage of the Torres Straits. And that is the end of the chapter. So it seems like the more I read this book, the more I like and sympathize with Captain Nemo. I hope he's not supposed to be the bad guy, because I think he's got a lot of the right ideas. You know, Monsieur Arnaud might have been freaking out about the savages, but Captain Nemo's like, oh, they're fine. They're living their lives, and I'm not going to hurt a single one of them. And good for you, even though you did shoot an otter. Don't agree with the shooting of an otter, but I do agree with him not like destroying the natives. So good on him. Anyway, that is where we are going to leave it for today. Tomorrow we will probably have guest reader Aaron back again. So hopefully you are looking forward to that as much as I am. And until then, please do hit the thumbs up on your way out. It does always make me smile, and I'll see you tomorrow.